Recording.
Yay.
Welcome to the Love Rising podcast, everyone. Today, Clara and I are super excited to welcome Cherie Chan to our little love circle here and have her be part of the Love Rising family. And so I'm just going to introduce her, and her story goes so much beyond just her introduction. So we're super excited to have her on. We're going to be talking about shifting through the noise of life and really finding simplicity, knowing when it's enough, too much, and then when it's all just hurting us. So she's going to really dive into that. I am a big fan of her just because she really does kind of exude this beautiful kind of mindset of simplicity. And her and her husband, just even following them on social media, you can tell that they're just genuine and they know the important things in life, and it's relationships and it's time together and it's adventure and just things that make them happy. And so I'm really excited to have her share her wisdom with us today. But a little bit about Cherie. She found CrossFit in 2007 while looking for a program to get fit for mountain biking and climbing. And having competed in mountain biking, competing in CrossFit was a natural and fun way to express all the hard training. Cherie competed twice as a CrossFit Games individual and once on a team, and 4 times at a CrossFit regional event, with her highest achievement making it to the 2011 CrossFit Games after a back injury. Starting an affiliate with her husband, Matt, in 2008 and joining the CrossFit seminar training staff in 2010, Cherie has over 10 years experience coaching CrossFit and training trainers. At 44, Cherie attributes her capacity to the last decade of training and is stronger and healthier than she has ever been. Her passion is in training as a lifestyle, staying injury-free, and having fun. I love that having fun is like what we're left with, because that is what it's all about. So welcome, Cherie. We are so super excited to have you. We're going to have so much fun today. But what we would love for you to do is just really dive into your story, your journey, and kind of share it with our listeners.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Kylie. That was awesome. It's always funny to tell your story because you're like, well, which one would you like? Because there are so many different facets, especially the older that you get. But I think what really drew me to your podcast, and maybe will be with your listener, is the concept of Love Rising, the name of your podcast. And as I go through life and as I learn lessons, and whether it be training or nutrition or relationships or finances or simplifying life or minimalism, like you name the category, that is one thing that stays constant, is love. And I think that has guided me in every decision that I've made. And when I was reading some of the questions that you were sending me, that is the common link to making decisions, is what do you love and what does your heart say to you? So from a very young age, I've always felt that way. I left home and got into a VW bus when I was 18 and drove around the country. Ended up in Colorado and stayed here for 6 months, and then moved to Hawaii for 10 years. And, was just a vagabond there, and then moved back to Colorado and moved to a ski resort. So I spent the first 15 or 20 years of my life roaming around like a little gypsy, trying to figure out what the world was about, because I knew it was more than academic. And so I guess my real story is that I just sort of follow my heart. And I met my husband at a ski resort. We both were living in a restaurant, and he bought a mountain bike and invited me to go on a ride with him. And the rest is history there. But yeah, I think CrossFit, as far as that being my bio, is just something I found to keep me healthy for all those other things that I love.
Yeah. And I think I think that all of us can kind of relate to that. CrossFit did really bring kind of a fun aspect to staying actually healthy, to be able to do the other things. And I also think we can all say that it's really brought us into a beautiful community.
Absolutely. It's so easy to work out and do a workout in your garage. It really is. It's not difficult. But man, I go to the affiliate for the people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why I go when I go. So yeah, it's the people that you meet and the support that you get is second to none.
Mm-hmm. So, while we're kind of talking about it, it seems like you've always really kind of just looked for the simplicity in life. I mean, not thinking like, okay, this is the whole routine. You go to college and then you find a man you're married and then you marry him, and or this and that. And you've kind of looked for just more of a simple, laid back, what is my heart desire? And so I would love for, I think, well, and maybe you could repeat, you were saying a little bit about how, we as women nowadays just tend to be taking on a lot more than we ever have before. So maybe you could expand a little bit on that and just see, what you've noticed and what you've seen as a trainer, as a coach. You've worked with probably a lot of women. And so maybe you can share your experience with that and what does busy really look like? What's enough? And, how is that harming us and how is it making things flow better?
I do believe that all people have that piece of them in their heart that they want to follow and that they're trying to achieve. And I think in sort of the society that we've maybe unintentionally created around ourselves, women are put in a position that they're trying to get or achieve or do the next thing for themselves, for their family, for their job, for their career, for that next achievement that I have to get done in order to then be a successful person in some way. And I just feel like there's a lot of pressure to be great at everything. And even in our current trend, there's this pressure to also be peaceful and to also be full of love. And now you need to be grateful, and now you need to meditate. But don't forget, you also need to eat right, which is a lot of food prep. And you also need to be there for your kids in a way that other generations weren't. And you also have to have a successful career. So I think there's just so much pressure to live up to all of that. And the reality is that's impossible, and so as far as simplifying things, it's all about deciding what really is important to you, not what's important to society, and not trying to live up to what you think you're supposed to do, because we all have that. Like, I don't care who you are, we all feel like there are things we're supposed to live up to. And sometimes we do it and we go towards them unconsciously. And if we can be a little bit more intentional with, okay, these are the three main things that are really important to me. So when I schedule my week, like, these are the things that take precedent over anything else. We can start to strip away the things that just eat up who we are in our time, because we have like no greater resource than our time. And if we just allow it to be taken by all these things, well, then we aren't going to use it in a way that makes us the happiest, the most fulfilled. So I think simplifying will take the crazy in our heads that's constantly going on and calm it down a little bit and allow us to have some true like happiness and peace versus just trying to achieve happiness and peace.
Oh, I love that distinction. Trying to achieve, like being that person who's trying to achieve, we're doing the meditating, we're doing the readings, we're listening to the podcast, we're, taking deep breaths and checking off the Epsom salt bath. And, we're trying to achieve peace, but we're not actually experiencing peace. Yeah. I've so been there.
We all have, right? Like,
yeah.
Everybody that's listening can identify with that.
Oh, totally. Yes. And I just love that. I think I wrote a blog post, or probably lots of blog posts on this, but on, just how unrealistic that goal is, that I need to have a good relationship with my husband and my parents and my friends. And I need to have this amazing, like really inspiring job. And then I also need to be this amazing mother. And I also need to look really good doing it and food prep. And just how crazy, how much pressure we put on ourselves. A lot of times this, it does come from society, but it also comes from ourselves. I mean, I think ultimately, if we really take the power back, we see this pressure is coming from me. No one around me is telling me I have to do all these things. I just kind of get the sense of it from like TV and media, and then I put all this pressure on myself. So what is, obviously simplifying is an amazing answer to that. So how do people simplify? Like what's, I guess, something that you do that's like, this is how I decide between these two things I feel like I should do?
Well, and that's an interesting question, because for me, it's always been a battle between being too simple and being too busy. And it's like, have I ever found the medium of that? You know, I've had periods in my life where I was so unbelievably busy that I couldn't even take a phone call, or, you know, I didn't even have time to answer that email. And then I've had other periods of my life where I'm like, okay, there's too much space. Like I need to fill it with something because I've gone on the other side of this pendulum. And so I think that about maybe a year and a half ago, my husband and I decided to simplify, starting with our finances. So we decided that, you know, we were both traveling a ton. He was deciding to make a career change. And so we knew we were going to be making considerably less money. And we decided, we're like, okay, well, if that's coming, we should really look at what we spend and how to simplify it. And we're really bad and good with money. We're both. But we had, you know, a high mortgage, and we were spending an unbelievable amount of money on food. Like, your listeners are going to freak out. We were spending almost $5,000 a month on food. And so it was like, okay, we need to make some changes here. So what we did is we decided to sell our home, move back to Denver, and slowly chip away at decreasing our monthly debt. So I sold my car, and we put all that money on his, so we don't have his car payment anymore. And I'd say like 8 to 9 months after that decision, we took our monthly debt finances, and they were literally 25% of what they had been previously. And so that alone simplified everything else. Because if you're not working really hard to make the money to buy all that food, or working really hard to make that car payment, or to make sure that you can pay that high mortgage, well, then all of a sudden you're left with, what do I really want to do? Because I don't need to do it anymore. And I think that gave us the freedom to start making some choices. Because if you need to be that busy to keep up with whatever you've created debt-wise, well, then you don't really have as many choices as you want to have. So we started there. We started with finances. And once we got a handle on that and calmed that down, then we started with stuff. That was like the next step. It's like, okay, we've got this under control, and we're debt free other than our home, which was like a huge accomplishment in my world for like simplification. We decided to get rid of everything we don't use. So we did this challenge, which I found on the Minimalist podcast, which was get rid of one thing one day, 2 things the next day, 3 things the next day for 30 days. It ends up being like 600 items. And we both did it. So it ended up being like 1,200 items. And the average household has like 200,000 items, which is crazy. So I have cupboards now in my kitchen that don't have things in it. And I'd never had that in my life. Like, I always grew up not really having enough. So when you have something, you keep onto it, you hold on, and all you do is you keep accumulating more things. And it never occurred to me that, well, why? Like, just ask why. Like, do you really need all of this? And so those might not be the esoteric answers that people expected, but simplifying our finances and simplifying our belongings opened us up to make all of those other decisions that we had been wanting to make that we felt trapped by.
There's so much that I love inside of that little piece. And I'm inspired to like do the same thing. I just had a rummage sale and with my mom, and it was just like, yeah, going through things and just purging felt so good. But I guess the thing that, I mean, I'm super inspired by you guys just being like, okay, 1 thing today, 2 things the next day. When we're looking at whether it's an item or even examining like different areas of our life. So the job, the Epsom salt bath, the meditation, the PTA meeting, church, this, that, all that. When you're looking at those, and I think we have a lot of people who would say, but I like those things. They make me really, really busy. And I feel like I'm running in circles all the time. But so how do we really like take a good hard look and go, okay, do I really love this? Or am I just supposed to love it, so I'm loving it? And this is just a random thought, but it reminds me of this idea of like, there's so many things, like we are a being, we're a spiritual being. You can see that however you want. And then like, it's like we're a sticky one. And then all of a sudden you start to throw all these like tags and these like, and then they get stuck. And then you're like, okay, this is who I am. I'm like mom of the year. I'm on the school board. I have a really hot bod. I'm really good at food prepping. And I am like a CEO of my company. And you love those things, but like, I don't know where I'm going with this, but essentially I'm just wondering, like, when you kind of think you love these things and they make you happy, how do you really like sift through that?
It does. And the first thing that came to mind was like quality over quantity and like being present. So when you think back to, when your readers think back to the times that they've been really busy in their life, they were never present. And when you're not present in the things that you're doing, you don't have quality. And so, well, you may love those things, but you're not really experiencing them. And so by having a little less of them, you actually are fulfilled within them more, if that makes sense. So I think about it like a lesson my husband taught me a long time ago was, we're going to spend extra money for the thing that has quality versus less money for the thing that we can afford now, because we're just going to have to replace it another year. And that took me a really long time to learn that lesson, where it's like, I want one really great pair of jeans versus 7 pairs that aren't that great. And that's exactly how we have to think about our time in our life. It's like, hey, if I'm just, I know all that time is not quality. I can tell you right now, if you're constantly busy and doing all these things and everybody out there knows it intuitively, you are not filling it with quality. So strip it out so that you can have that quality. Because then all of a sudden, when you're hanging out with your friend, you're looking at them in the eyes, you're hearing what they have to say to you, you're feeling their presence with you in a way that you can't when you're busy. And then all of a sudden, the things that you love more. So yes, I believe that we do love all those things, but we can't really be present in them unless we just do a little less of them. And I think for some people, it depends on their economic status, how they're going to do that. You know, if you can hire someone to clean your house once a week, you freed up some time. If you can, some people who are very into their business, they could hire somebody as a virtual assistant to do all the little tasks that, nobody loves. Like, there's a lot of little ways that you can steal some time, if you will. But again, that does depend on your economic status, but you need to do it. You need to find ways to okay, I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to say no to these things because they don't mean as much as this other thing. And this other thing will be a lot more quality if I chill it out.
Yeah, I love that answer, and it wasn't the answer I was expecting, which I also love. And yeah,
now I'm curious. What was the answer you were expecting?
Well, no, I guess I was kind of expecting something that was more kind of more metaphysical or something, that was super practical and right on. It's yeah, quality over quantity. There's lots of stuff we're going to love. There's lots of stuff we want to do. But if we're just stretched super thin all the time, we just can't enjoy it, And so,
I
yeah.
love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm wondering, I love how you came at it from finances, because I think a lot of people probably are in that position where they never feel like they have quite enough. It's a very tangible place, I think, where a lot of us are okay, I can definitely feel the being stretched thin here in the finances world. And also the baby steps, just how it's one little thing and then another little thing. And then those become big sweeping changes over time. Have you I guess what I've noticed when I've simplified in my life, when I go through big purges, is this metaphysical thing of it's almost like my brain has felt really cluttered and heavy. And then I get rid of a bunch of clothes or something, and it's oh, I feel like I could breathe. So do you feel kind of simplifying your finances gave you that little bit of shot of oh, there's some clarity here, and then that kind of gave you the motivation to continue? Was it always the plan to continue like that? Or did the plan become bigger to simplify, as you kind of realize the benefits?
I don't know that simplification has ever been the goal. I think peace and love and chasing what you want to do has always been the goal. And I think at some point we realized that you have to do less to be able to do that. And so that became simplification. But simplification was never really the goal. But it's, I am a very practical person, but I'm also very esoteric. And it's like, I know that everything is energy. Like, that's it. Like, and you can think of that metaphysically, or you can think of it as like raw science. Everything is actually energy. And that means all of the things in your home are energy. And that means that if your space is actually cluttered, you are cluttered. And so it's like part of it, it's nice that my husband's always been a bit of a neat freak. So that's been really helpful. But I wasn't. Like, I was always like trying to collect things and not let go of them because I was always worried about not having enough. And the minute that I let go of that idea, it allowed myself to let go of that energy, which was running into all the other ways of my life. It was running in the way I responded to people, the way I trained people, my interactions. Like, it's weird how if your space is cluttered, everything around you is cluttered. So it was a physical thing that was affecting the way that I communicated and the way that I was as a person.
Yeah. Would you maybe expand a little bit on, you said once I moved past that idea of like, I haven't had enough and now I do, so I'm going to hold on to it. Are there any practical or any just even mental ways that you implemented to move through that?
Depends on the item type thing, right? Like with clothes, I decided to actually have a more systematic way of deciding, because I would like hang on to clothes forever because it's like, I will totally wear this. This is awesome. Meanwhile, then you have like so many clothes and they're ridiculous, and then you still go buy more. So one way that I would do it is I took everything and hung it up, and I put the hangers backwards. And if in 6 months or this season I hadn't worn that thing, it goes. And I now know that getting rid of things makes
I'm going to do that. That's great.
Clara's face was awesome.
Right? Like, it's so great. So I can let go of it now because I know how good it makes me feel. But I had to have a system for whatever it was. And sometimes it's just like the concept of discipline gives you freedom, where it's like, I used to have a really messy car. And it was just like constantly messy because that's where that was like the point between places. And so things get dropped there and left there and stuffed and all this other stuff. Well, that created this like horrible feeling every time I got into my car. So I had to create a system or a discipline that every time I got out of my car into my home, everything came with me and the car was empty. And that was really painful for like 6 months. And then all of a sudden it was like there was never anything in my car, and it wasn't even like a task. So I think whatever it is, you have to create a discipline so that you can follow through, and you'll hate yourself for a little while. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is just who I am now. I don't have a messy car anymore. I'm not that person. It's like calling people back. Like, you have to tell yourself, I'm going to be the person that calls people back. And then you have to like force yourself to do it. And then all of a sudden that's who you are. Like,
it's habit forming, and it's like so powerful.
Yep. So it has to be systematic in order for it to be natural, I think.
Yeah. I was listening to this podcast with Rebecca Campbell was getting interviewed. She wrote Light is the New Black and Rise Sister Rise. And she was talking about how, in a spiritual practice, which, is habit forming as well, any sort of habits, that, you have to be like guided by that inner kind of like heart voice, that soul voice. So I think that's kind of like, you're saying the goal was always peace. The goal was always more happiness. That's like that inner like soul kind of spiritual connection piece, right? It's like, I want to be connected to soul. I want to have space in my life so that I see this thread, not just frantically be doing all these things. But then the mind, the ego part kind of comes in with that discipline. Like, we need the discipline, to make the habit, or to continually do the things, even when it's like painful it's not the way we normally do things, So I liked that when she was talking about, this is like where the heart comes in, and then this is where your very human mind comes in, is like sticking to it and having that discipline throughout, so that you then have more clarity with that soul led place. Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting. Like, I don't know how many other people out there just thought that peaceful people were just peaceful people. You know what I mean? Like, they just magically
right,
happy or present or whatever it is that we admire. Like, there's people out there in the world that you'll admire your whole life. And generally, like, I remember this woman, Nancy, that I used to know on the Big Island. She worked at like a plant nursery. And if you look at her, like a biography standpoint, nothing really stands out. But I've always remembered her and admired her my whole life, because she had this inner peace that was just so admirable. And it's like, she didn't just get there because she woke up as a peaceful child. She didn't wake up a little mini Jesus. Like, maybe she had more inclinations towards it than other people. But there are disciplines, there are like systems, there are like, okay, I want or need this in my life to be who I want, so I'm going to set that forward. And then all of a sudden she's in her 50s and that's just who she is now. Yeah. So
I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's just not as natural as we all want it to be, I guess.
But thank you for like saying that, and for giving permission to practice. Like, practice simplicity, practice inner peace, practice happiness.
Yeah. And it comes back to those priorities, like you were saying at the beginning, like, it's like you have to kind of choose, like. And so one thing that I've noticed, like, I have a lot of friends kind of in the health and wellness world, and they're doing amazing things, and it's awesome. And I am too. But I think I value more, I moved back to Montana. I want this kind of peaceful lifestyle. I want a lifestyle where I have a lot of freedom, but I'm also relatively private. And so I have to remind myself, like, when if I compare myself to those people, like, that are out in the world doing all these things, really in front of people all the time, that I can make myself do that. But it's like, I almost have these split. It's like part of me is like, but I want to be peaceful and at home and private. And then the other part of me is like, but I should want to do this. So it's like really recognizing that it's okay for you to want different things than other people that might look very similar to you. Like, if someone looks very similar to you and they want totally different things, you don't have to want those things. You can want what you want. Yeah.
And who knows what's really going on in the behind the scenes of those people in those scenarios, My husband bought me a crazy gift last year, which was a seminar series to Tony Robbins. And so I went to all of his series of seminars last year. And you reminded me of something that he talks about, which is we have like these needs. And one of the needs is like security. And the other need is variety. And it's like, they're so opposing, and that's what you're talking about. Like, you want the love and the security and the peace of being in Montana, being home, but you also want the variety and the achievement and the excitement of those other things that they accomplish. And so I guess the real trick is, how do you have a little bit of both? Because you probably wouldn't be happy if you weren't achieving. And so your answer to that is obviously podcast and reaching people and spreading, your message and love out to so many women out there, which is an amazing way to fulfill that. But that's the trick, right? Finding how you can have a little bit of both.
Yeah. And I feel like variety is kind of like, you said sometimes in my life I've had too much space and sometimes I've been too busy. And that's that same polarity that we're kind of dancing in this harmony, hopefully harmony between these two kind of extremes, Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then just make sure that when the thing, it's nice to have some space, because you can make some choices where it's like, okay, I've got some space now. Where do I want to put my energy when the pendulum swings the other way? And can I make this an intentional direction versus just a direction of achievement? We have this mindset of just achieve. And, I'm kind of bummed that it took me getting older to figure out that, like, that's not the goal. Like, you don't just achieve for the sake of achieving and for the sake of having stuff. you know. But I think we feel like we're supposed to, and we don't when we sort of do it unconsciously for a very long time.
Yeah, I think also there's something kind of in that when we simplify, it goes back to you talking about being present. And when you're present, you're going to enjoy the journey a little bit more than the achievement. And so I think that that's something that probably just with age, we really do have to try on and practice and even stop. And Claire and I have talked about this before, but like, you know, having this idea of right now in this moment, this is the best moment of my life, like right here, right now. And then in 5 minutes, that'll be the best moment of my life. And so like, how can I be present with it in that? And how can I just find like pure joy and simplicity within that moment? Like there's nothing else that needs to happen. There's nothing else I need to focus on right now, you know? And I think that has helped me kind of even notice like what areas of my life aren't really like driving with my flow and driving with my busyness, because I think like we can be slowly busy maybe.
Yeah.
And we can, you know, and we can keep ourselves busy with things that really bring us joy, and we can just be busy with things that fill our time, which is so easy to do, I think.
So easy to do. And I love what you said about like, this is the best moment of my life, and the next one will be as well. My brain doesn't allow me to have impracticalities. Like I'll call myself out inside, and I have a very hard time with stuff like that because of that. So I've changed it to, this is the only moment of my life. And who do I want to be in this moment? Mm-hmm. And when I decide who I want to be, all of a sudden it is the best. Because then my brain will think back to like the best moments. Like, well, it's not your wedding day. You know, it's like all the crazy stuff that your brain says. But if I keep asking myself who I want to be, I tend to be more present and happier in those moments because of that. But I love that. That's just, that's where it's at. Knowing the moment it's all we have.
Yeah. And what a simple way to look at life, you know, like talk about simplicity. It's like, what if we just focused on this moment? And I know it's, you know, yes, our minds will want to complicate it. They'll say, but what about this? But what about that? But what about this? And yeah, like we're going to get in those, you know, those knots in our minds, and that's okay too. But like, what if that was like the real secret, you know, was just like, come back to this moment. Gets a little dizzying, but
like have goals where you're going and all that sort of stuff is super important. But in the moment, like you can still have all that stuff and plan for all that stuff, but you act so differently if you come into the mindset that Kylee was talking about. Yeah.
I think another thing I would love for us to maybe touch on is this idea, especially I think for women, that if we do simplify, like how are we going to get anything done? Like how is simplifying just not going to make us fall behind and be lazy or things like that?
Well, I think sometimes it does make you lazy, and then you feel like, oh, well, that's not who I want to be. But I also think that that's a resting period where it's like, okay, you ran yourself ragged and now you feel like doing nothing. And so you're going to beat yourself up about being busy, and now you're going to beat yourself up about being lazy. It's like, well, that's a vicious but the body needs to rejuvenate. And if you've been crazy for a really long time, I think it's important for people to recognize there might be a period of nothing getting done, and that you have to be okay with your body resetting. And then once you've decided, okay, that's enough, I'm ready to be excited about whatever the next thing is, you really do just have to decide what your priorities are. Like maybe you don't get some stuff done, but maybe you don't even really care if that gets done, and you just think you do. Like, I mean, there really aren't that many things that we have to get done. We put all these things on ourselves, you know, whatever these things are that we have to get done. I have to get the taxes done. I still haven't done that for last year. We have an extension till October. I've got to get that done. But I could also just pay somebody to do that and get the stress off of my head, you know? So I don't know if I have an answer to that, except knowing what it is that you truly need to get done, and then being okay with the fact that if you've been busy for a really long time and it's been nonstop, you're going to need a downtime. The pendulum's going to have to swing the other way. My husband and I suppose is a good thing, but we went like all in for a really long time, about 7 years of like constant busy. Laundry's not getting done, yard work's not getting done, like that, the stuff of to maintaining our home and our personal little family wasn't getting done because we both had 2 jobs. We're traveling with CrossFit all over the place. We owned a business. We're personal training people. And there came a point where that will run you down so much that we just gave it all up. And we just bought an Airstream and lived in an Airstream for a year. And we were like, well, we can't do any of it. And so the only reason we couldn't do any of it is because we tried to do all of it. So if we'd made better, and that ended up being a good solution and a good life lesson for us. But if you don't want to end up in an Airstream or whatever you want to call your midlife crisis, then you have to decide like, okay, I can't do all of it. So what is it that I want to do? And I think we would have made those choices earlier, and I would have been way better at running a business had I done that. And I would have been way better with my clients had I done that. So.
Yeah, I know, that's so good. And it's so important that we remind us, as well as the people that are listening, that life does ebb and flow like that. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, and I think that as we go through that ebb and flow, at least what I've noticed is like, I make more intentional decisions because of that.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I kept, I'm kind of I believe that like things come in threes. Like if I get like recommended a book 3 times, like in a short amount of time, or, it's kind of like a sign from the universe, like, hey, pay attention to this. And I kept hearing about this probably more than 3 times, this thing that put 3 items on your to-do list for the day. And like, just, that's what you do. Cause I have this habit of overscheduling myself, never getting the to-do list done, always having things going to the next day and then feeling even more overwhelmed the next day. And so I kept hearing this practice of, from multiple people. I think like Gabby Bernstein said it, and then I read it in a book, and then, I heard it on podcasts. Like I'm hearing it all over the place to put 3 things on your to-do list, and that's the 3 things you do, and maybe write those things down the night before. And I just was like, that's insane. I have to do more than 3 things. Like I can't just do 3 things in one day. Like that's crazy. And so I was really fighting it, and then I heard it directly, like from a coach to me. Like she was like, this is your practice. Do this practice. And it was like so many people just telling me to do this. Right. So I did it. And it was like, what I realized was it gave me a lot of false sense of security to feel like I was needed for all these things. Right. It was like, I have to do a list of 20 things a day. I could never get rid of, 17 things. And so I just think sometimes like the lesson was like, the world's not going to fall apart if you don't do this thing that you think is so important. Right. So like, stop taking myself so seriously. It was kind of the lesson. Right. It was like, you can make 3 things, do those things, congratulate yourself for doing them, getting them done, and the world won't fall apart. So
I think you hit a tiny little snippet of why people don't stop doing it though. And that's the need feeling. It's like, well, if I don't do this, nobody's going to need me. And then what's left over is this empty space. And that's
totally
space we have to fill with spirituality, understanding ourselves, nurturing whoever it is we really want to be, and realizing that everybody still needs us. And they need us to be more present, and they don't need us to be busying around making, cookies for the soccer team. They need us to be there with them in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's so true. I think it's that empty. I think that's the addiction to busyness, is we are terrified of the emptiness because we're a society based on productivity is worth, right? Or pain equals pleasure. We don't deserve pleasure unless we experience some sort of pain or struggle, right? We don't deserve it unless we've worked for it. And so it's like that space is where the pleasure comes in. Like spaces are where joy can like come up. But we don't allow the space because we're just scared of space, because we're so addicted to productivity. And I definitely, I mean, I haven't quite figured this out. I'm definitely still there, but I do recognize that I immediately, you know, we always say in coaching, what comes up right before the action you're taking that you don't want to take. Like say you are addicted to, you know, you love eating cookies all the time. And so it's like, what comes up right before that pushes you into, yeah. So is it a feeling of emptiness? Is it a feeling of space? Because for me, I think it is. It's like, oh, is there a little space for me to not have anything to do? I better find something to do really fast, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. I heard an interesting analogy on this topic about museums and the idea that you can have, just imagine a storage unit full of paintings and artwork. And it's just like a hoarder atmosphere where it's just full of beautiful things. But when you go in there, you don't feel like they're beautiful things. And now imagine something that's a little more curated and you go into a museum and the difference, they might be the same paintings, but the difference is the space. And the difference is the curation that you've created to choose just a couple of these beautiful things. That's what makes them more beautiful than to have the whole storage unit full of beautiful things. Then you just feel overwhelmed.
That's so good. I love that. So, Cherie, you've given us so many practical tools, which I love. My brain likes those. But what is and you can pull from what we've gone over today, but what is like one challenge that you would love to give our listeners to start implementing today that they can really start using to help simplify their lives?
To help simplify, that is such an interesting one. A challenge to give the listeners. First, I would just pick one thing in their life that they decide they want to simplify. And so, like I said, mine was finances, and then things. Theirs can be their schedule. It can be whatever you want. Just pick one thing and spend 30 days focusing on that one thing. So make a 1, 2, 3 step process. Don't make it too complicated or it won't happen. Like take the thing, focus on it for 30 days. And at the end of the 30 days, reflect back on it and decide, was that good for me? Was that bad for me? Do I want to pick something else or do I want to stay with this thing? And you just pick something else you want to work on or to simplify, and you just keep moving in that direction, because we also crave growth. And if we just keep spinning our wheels, we don't truly grow. So pick it, stick to it for 30 days, and then when you're done, choose something else to grow with.
Yep, that's so good. I love it. Now I have to decide
what's the thing?
What's the thing?
Mine's clothes. That little
like
tip about the hangers, because I've been just struggling with it. I've been like, but I like all these, and sometimes I wear them, and it's like, I think I maybe have worn that in the last 6 months, I think, you know, and I don't know for sure, so then I end up keeping it. But yeah, I'm gonna do that, because I do think it's like, if I haven't worn it in 6 months, or maybe a year, because I live in Montana, there's different seasons, but a year.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a really good reason to not have it anymore, even if it's great.
I mean, even when you live out in the country and you work from home,
Yeah,
I feel like we need less clothes.
I know it's a problem.
I know my husband and I pick something different that we work on every month now. And he's going to be working on sleep for the next month. And I'm going to work on, because a lot of times I work from home as well. And I personally find struggle in creating a routine. I will go do the laundry. I will prep some food. I will do so many things other than get the work done that I need to. Yep. My next focus is going to be on creating a routine so I can be a little more productive.
I love it. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. It's great.